Well, to discuss this, we're joined by Dr Chaand Nagpaul, GP and Chair of the British Medical Association, and Dr Bharat Pankhania, a Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Let's first come to you, Dr Nagpaul. I mean, what do you think? I mean, we're not talking about institutional racism, although there's intentional of racism, are we, in the medical profession? We're talking about racial bias that has just come from behaviour and norms and perhaps taking the eye off the ball, maybe, a little bit?
Yes, I agree. I mean, this is not intentional. What this reflects is that a lack of consideration of ethnic diversity at the development and research when medical devices are created. So what we found here is that after the event, that the monitors for blood oxygen levels overestimated the readings for people with darker skin, and that can have serious consequences because decisions are made around patients who are critically ill on the levels of their oxygenation. So what we're calling for is that when we have devices developed, there needs to be proper research and proper assessment of people from different and diverse races and ethnic backgrounds. The same applies for drugs. There are some drugs that do not work as well in patients of certain races. Common drugs for blood pressure, for example, we've since found do not work for some Afro-Caribbean patients, drugs called ACE inhibitors. Again, the research seems to be not ethnically diverse. So what we're calling for is starting off recognizing that the world is made up of people from different ethnicities, different skin colors, different races, and you should do research that's based upon encompassing all of those. And that applies even to medical education. We're taught how to treat patients with skin disorders on white skins. The textbooks that I grew up with, the learning materials out there, do not show ethnically diverse training material.
Dr Bharat Pankhania, you're Senior Clinical Lecturer at the Exeter University Medical School. It must have come as a shock to many people when asked, had people died of COVID as a result of this failure of the oximeters to, take account of the different colour of skin, that Sajid Javid said, I think possibly yes. I mean, a simple piece of equipment with a life-saving value that wouldn't have worked in some cases. That's devastating, isn't it?
Well, you would never treat a patient just on a reading. So look, let's have another example. Just because an ECG is flat lining, meaning a straight line, no cardiac activity, and that doesn't mean the patient is dead. You need to look at the patient. The cables might have just come off. So similarly, here with the pulse oximeter, it is not a case of you're looking at the patient and reading it, but not looking at the patient and assessing the patient's health and well-being. So really, the issue is, it is an oversight that the pulse oximeters were created and they are mass-produced. And when these items are mass-produced, they're mass-produced for an average skin color. And of course, when you want to make things cheap and readily available in their millions, you are unlikely to make a pulse oximeter calibrated for darker skin, lighter skin, and in between. So these are issues. These are issues of mass production and trying to get the greatest items cheaply onto the market. I don't think this is a racial bias issue. It is an overlooked issue rather than we were purposefully negligent or not looking into it. And I completely disagree that lives would have been lost just because the pulse oximeter was giving the wrong reading. Because your assessment always has to be, look at the patient. How is the patient performing?
Yes, and